Hi everyone, hope your summer's going great so far. Welcome back to another week of the Alameda Hope Garden. And this week we're going to be talking about propagating your plants. And I'm going to specifically focus on food, as well as a couple other tips for some houseplants. But I'm going to show you guys this week how to take the scraps that you may have from when you're cooking your meals, or extra food that you may have around, how to harvest seeds from them, as well as use the cuttings that you might just throw away or throw in the garbage disposal and actually turn them into more plants. So that way you have a continual cycle of growing and regrowing your food, herbs, veggies, all sorts of things. So I'm very excited. I do this all the time with stuff that I use on a regular basis. And I will show you a couple of examples right now. Let's get started. All right, so here is one of our gardens. We have some tomato plants, some carrots, some onions, and some lettuce. So I want to kind of go through some of the things that I have done to help propagate some of the food that we have, and then we're going to go inside and I'm going to show you kind of how I set everything up. So we propagate a lot of onions and lettuce because we use those the most. We also propagate our herbs, specifically mint and basil, because those two are really strong. They grow everywhere. They're really hardy. So one of our lettuces that we've done is we have this. So this is a butter leaf lettuce that you might get from the store. We did a meal service plan for the past couple of weeks where we get meals sent for the week from like HelloFresh or Home Chef, one of those companies. And some of the recipes included doing like a lettuce wrap. And so they sent this big thing of butter lettuce in a container, and it was just kind of still had the roots attached to it. And so what we did is after we got it, we went ahead and just planted it in the soil, and you can see it's starting to pop up right now. We literally just dug it in the hole and new lettuce is starting to grow. Now this is one that we did a couple of weeks ago, and you can see, holy cow, there are a ton of, there's a ton of butter lettuce now. So even with just one piece of scrap food, if you cultivate it and give it some food and some sunlight and put it in some good soil, you are able to really kind of completely regrow a whole other thing. This is probably 3 or 4 times even bigger than what they sent to us. So we're set on butter lettuce for a while. You can do the same thing here. Here I have some shallots. Back there I have some green onions, and you can just take those cuttings, those little root cuttings, and if you want, you can start them inside in a little pot, or if you are confident and comfortable, you can just toss them in your soil outside, and you can create some really great kind of sustainable food for yourself. So here's some of our herb garden. It's in a raised bed, along with some more lettuce, and we have some strawberries in here too. But here is our mint plant that we use to propagate. And so when we would decide to propagate some of our herbs, what we will do is we will just take a couple of cuttings from our plant. And when we do this, we want to do it at the point where there are more leaves that are gonna start growing. Let's zoom in on here a little bit. And so we'll cut it to make sure that it allows the plant to grow more leaves. And you're gonna want about a 3-inch cut. So we'll just take some of the larger the larger stems. We'll clip those off, and then we're gonna take the majority of the leaves off, and then we're gonna take them inside, and I'll show you what we do inside. All right, so we're gonna go through a couple of steps on how to start propagating some of the things that you might have around your house, so that way you can have these things all year round. So I grabbed a couple of sprigs of mint, and what I'm gonna do is you want about 3 inches or so, depending on the size of your container, for your roots to grow. So you'll trim off your leaves from your mint here, and you're gonna wanna get rid of any of these little suckers, I call them. They are leaves that are in the middle that might be spreading up. You're gonna wanna limit the amount of leaves that you have, and you're gonna want a long stem. You also, if your plant has kind of a waxy coating on the stem, you could take a pair of scissors and gently trim off the bottom part of that. And then you're gonna place it into a container of water for a couple of days. You should start to see some roots grow in, I would say, 5 to 7 days. Once you have those roots, starting to grow in the water, then you can transfer them into the soil and start to take care of them in the soil. So you could transfer them directly into the ground, or you could directly transfer them into a potted plant, a pot on your counter or your windowsill. So you could either transfer it inside to a potted plant or outside into your garden. This is a great way also to propagate things to move into different locations around your property. So I'm going to be propagating this mint so I can plant some to use as a ground cover in the front of my house as well. Since mint grows like crazy, it's really hard to kill. So once you have your mint in, or your herb, you can do basil, you can do any type of herb this way. Rosemary is really great to propagate this way. You're going to just let it sit on a sunny windowsill until those roots grow, and then you're going to place them in the soil once they have a good root system made. So super easy, kind of a fun activity to watch and grow. Some other things that you can use to propagate in water. You can do this with green onions. So if you cut off the bottom of the green onion, you can do that. You also can propagate larger onions like this. So when you go to trim your onion, you're going to want to leave about an inch or so. You're going to chop this into kind of a square type thing with the root on the bottom. So when you go to the store and you look for onions, try to find onions that still have a few little roots on there. Chop this guy up, and then you're going to place this just directly into the soil and take care of it that way. And then over time, it'll start to grow. So you can try this out with a couple different onion varieties. The larger onions you're going to plant directly into the ground. If you're going to use gathering onions or green onions with the little white stems and the green tops, you're going to trim about an inch or so, an inch to 2 inches off the bottom. You'll probably want to soak them in a little bit of water too, like we were doing with the herbs, to kind of let those roots grow again, and then you can place those into the ground as well. You can also do stuff like garlic. So with garlic cloves, you can just take the individual cloves. You don't have to open them up or anything, but you can separate out these cloves, place them into a pot or a raised bed or outside in the garden, and propagate them that way. For seeding things, stuff like tomatoes, you can cut open in half So you can just take your tomato and you can cut it in half, and you can just take those halves, place them in the soil, cover them up, and then eventually tomato plants will start to grow. Now, I would not recommend doing this as we get towards the end of the harvesting season in Colorado, unless you have a dedicated space to protect these guys over the winter. So if you do have a greenhouse space, or if you have space either in a storage shed or a room where you have hydroponics growing, you could do that as well. But yeah, just cutting this open, leaving kind of all of the guts inside, and then placing those halves seed side up down into the soil, and then covering them up so that way it can grow. That's a great way, especially if you find a variety of tomato that you like, like cherry tomato or even larger tomatoes. You can just harvest those seeds and start to kind of keep them ready to go for next year. So hopefully these propagating tips were really helpful. I find propagating to be a really fun activity to do. And for stuff that grows really quick, like lettuces, it's a really great money saver, because you can take the scraps from the romaine lettuce or the whatever other bulk lettuce that you get, toss it in the ground, and in a couple weeks you'll have way more lettuce than you know what to do with. So that way you don't have to keep going to the store, keep buying the same romaine hearts over and over again, or the same butterleaf lettuce over and over again. For stuff that's already harvested, stuff like spinach, anything that's loose, kale, that's going to be a lot harder to propagate. Try to find things that still have root systems intact. So stuff like onions, potatoes, garlic, or stuff that still has seeds in it. So you can harvest seeds from bell peppers, tomatoes, citrus. If you really want to try to grow some citrus here in Colorado, it's a challenge. But you can absolutely try that. Avocados, there's tons of different opportunities for you to go in, start harvesting seeds of food that you like, or if you buy maybe some heirloom tomatoes from a local vendor and you cut open half of the tomato, you harvest half of those seeds, keep them for next growing season, and then eat the other half of the tomato. It's kind of a cool way just to kind of remind ourselves that the food we eat can still be regrown, and just because it's harvested and picked doesn't mean that it's dead. You can still cultivate it and continue to grow more from it, which is a really awesome thing to see, especially when you see it before your eyes. Having a little teeny butter lettuce, nub that has some roots in it still, and you're like, oh, let's throw it in the ground and see if we can grow from it. And then for it to explode into such a giant plant is really quite awesome. Again, if you are going to be harvesting seeds, a couple of safety tips. Always use proper knife safety. Whenever you're cutting something, you always want to make sure your fingers are curled and you're letting the blade glide along your hand, so that way you're not going to accidentally nick a finger. Especially with round objects like tomatoes and onions, you are probably going to want to do an initial cut to create a flat surface, so that way when you are trimming things with a knife, it's not going to roll around. Also, if you are going to be harvesting seeds from peppers, specifically chilies, serranos, habaneros, any of those really high spice peppers, I would suggest wearing gloves and making sure that you wash your knife, cutting board, and countertop really well after using it. Because the oil from those peppers, if you get it into your eye or even onto your skin, it can be a real irritant. Stuff like bell peppers, I haven't had any issues with, but if you know that you have sensitive skin, just use proper safety for that. I harvest bell pepper seeds all the time. I always try to grab a red, a yellow, and a green throughout the year and just have a little plastic bag of them. I wash them, rinse them, dry them out, and have a little plastic bag of them, so that way when it comes springtime and we're starting seeds in the house, we can try to get some of those started up and see how well those pepper plants grow. It's amazing to see that plants can have hundreds and hundreds of seeds. You can get hundreds and hundreds of plants from just one of the fruit one of the pepper, one of the whatever. Kiwis have over 2,000 seeds in just one kiwi, and each one of those seeds could potentially grow into another kiwi plant. So it's a great way to realize that our food is so much bigger than us, and we might take for granted. You might seed a tomato without even thinking about it, but really you're throwing away the possibility at growing more food. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's a cool activity. Watching the roots grow from basil and mint and rosemary in that glass container, or even little onion trimmings from the green onions, watching those roots grow is a really fun activity to see throughout the weeks. And then we look at it, we go, okay, the roots are, a couple inches long now. I think it's ready to transfer into the pot. And then it's kind of like raising a kid. You get to see like the little infant part of them and start to see them grow, and then you cultivate them and hope that they blossom and grow into bigger and better things. So I hope you had a great time this week. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. There's a lot of information on propagating food online. You can ask me, and if you decide to propagate stuff, make sure that you snap some photos of it and share, so that way we all can kind of see how it goes. Yeah, the main thing is get a couple of trimmings with some root systems or potential root systems, toss it in some water for a couple of days to get those roots activated and starting to grow. When the roots are a couple of inches long, then they're ready to go into the soil. And just like I showed you, some of the foods that we have are already soil ready, like garlic and larger onions. So yeah, have some fun, give it a try. At the very least, if it doesn't end up propagating, you have created some more compost for your garden. So good luck, and I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great week.